Hello everybody, welcome back. It's JP again. In this video, I'm going to talk about this right here. I had it backwards, sorry. This right here is my private pilot's license. Last week I passed my private pilot check ride, and this is the temporary license that they give you. I'll get a little card in the mail in a few weeks. Kind of sort of similar to your driver's license when they give you a temporary printout one and you gotta wait for it in the mail. Same deal here. In this video, I'm going to talk about my entire check ride, which including the ground portion and the flight portion of it, and my experience of it, and kind of some tips and some questions that he asked me on the ground, as well as how we went about doing the actual flight. So before the check ride even starts, the examiner is going to give you a route as well as their weight, so you can fill out a weight and balance sheet. For my check ride, he had me make a route from Goodyear, Arizona to Tucson, Arizona, as well as give me his weight so I could fill out a weight and balance sheet, as well as the takeoff and landing data for that as well. So starting with the ground, our ground was probably about 2.5 hours long. The first thing we talked about was the pilot qualifications, some privileges and limitations, as well as medical certificate stuff, walking through different FARs. And then we kind of transitioned to the airworthiness, how I determine if the airplane is airworthy, going through different acronyms and items like that. How to determine if you or yourself are able to fly. We also discussed, after airworthiness, we talked about determining how an airplane is unworthy if something's broken on it, like inoperative or something like that. And he gave me two different scenarios. He gave me one scenario where the anti-collision lights were broken, and then he gave me another scenario where the flaps, flap motor didn't work, so the flaps weren't working. And we kind of talked through those and how to determine if you're still able to fly or not. We talked about special flight permits, where to get them and what circumstances you're able to obtain a special flight permit under. From there, we went into aerodynamics. We went into lift, Bernoulli's equation, Newton's laws, thrust from the propeller. We went into the left-hand turning tendencies from the propeller. We also went into CG and how being overweight aircraft affects the overall performance, as well as how the center of gravity affects the performance of the aircraft too, if it's moved either forward or aft. After that, we kind of talked about the flight plan, some things we go through before we start our flight. We talked about different airspaces that we would go through, different altitudes, fuel consumption, cruising speeds, airspaces as well. The Tucson airspace is a Class C airspace, so we talked about the different requirements you'll need to operate in that airspace. We talked about the dimensions of different airspaces as well. We also went over NOTAMs, any NOTAMs along our route. We went over PIREPs. We went over METARs. We went over the types of weather that you could expect from different fronts, as well as different pressure systems. After that, he wanted me to give him a full briefing, a weather briefing. So in ForeFlight, there's a little option when you make your flight where you can do a brief, and then I kind of just walked him through that and everything along our flight that we can expect from taking off to arrival. We talked about human factors in case a passenger or yourself is feeling sick, airsick. We talked about hyperventilation and also carbon monoxide, some causes of it, and what to do if it does happen during flight. And then we transitioned to the systems of the aircraft. So the aircraft that we fly at United Aviate is the Cirrus SR-20. So we talked about different systems like the engine, the fuel system, as well as the electrical system on the plane. We went into that into quite detail, so definitely be prepared to know your aircraft systems. So moving into the flight portion of the check ride, went about, got the book, got the keys to the airplane, and did a walk around pre-flight assessment. And he didn't ask me any questions on that, besides if the oil was at its normal levels. He kind of just watched me go through my checklists. We started up the plane, did run up, and then we first started with a short field takeoff out of Goodyear, and we started navigating along our pilotage points for that flight plan to Tucson that I created before the check ride. After about 2 waypoints, he went ahead and had me put the foggles on, and I disabled the GPS autopilot because the Cirrus does have GPS autopilot that they wanted us to use to demonstrate that we know how to use it. So we had to disable that, and then with the foggles on, he gave us different headings to go on while maintaining our altitude, and as well as tuning into a VOR and following a radial on a VOR. After a few different heading turns and climbs and descents, we did unusual attitudes. He had me close my eyes and look down, and then he had me go into a right turn, and then he had me open my eyes, and you'll just find yourself in an unusual attitude and you have to recover from that. After that, we did a diversion. We diverted to Buckeye, and in that diversion, he wanted us to hit the direct key on the PFD and take him to Buckeye, and he wanted to know the fuel time and the distance it would take to get there. After that, after I told him all the information for the diversion, then we went into slow flight. After slow flight, we did power on and off stalls, and after that, we did our steep turns, and then he gave me an emergency. And the emergency he gave me was no oil pressure, so we completely lost oil pressure. So we went through our emergency QRC checklist and all of our emergency procedures. After we got down to lower altitude after the emergency, we did our ground reference maneuvers, and he picked the point that he wanted. We did turns around a point, and so he picked the point for me. He pointed out, he said, yeah, I want you to do turns around a point right there at that cattle shed, or wherever we might be. And we did turns around a point there. And then after that, we went back to Goodyear and requested touch and goes. And our first touch and go, we did a forward slip to a landing. And then after that, we did a short field landing after that. And that one was to a full stop, the short field landing. And then we did a short field takeoff out of that. So that one was actually a stop and go, short field landing, stopped, and then we did a short field takeoff. And then the last one was a soft field landing that we did. And after that, we just taxied back to parking, tied up the plane, and then we went inside and he debriefed me. And that was about it for my private pilot check ride. We did some stuff in Niagara where you had to sign it, and then I printed out the form here that I needed to sign on the side there, the temporary airman certificate, and my card will come in the mail in a couple weeks. And that's pretty much it for my experience. Now I'm going to be starting my instrument training, which is very exciting. A lot of looking inside at the panel instead of looking outside, mostly like you would for your private pilot's license. So I'll keep you guys updated. If you like this video, or if you have any questions about anything I talked about in my experience, or if you have any more in-depth questions for me, please go ahead and leave them below, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that you guys have. Thanks guys, I'll see you in the next video. Adios.